On Wednesday, July 31st, Lieutenant Charles Z. Walker, age 33, lost his life in a low-level training accident while operating his F-18E Super Hornet in the Death Valley Military Operations Area. 7 spectators on the ground were injured. The military will be investigating the crash as they investigate all their crashes. There will be no involvement by the FAA or the NTSB. The crash site appears to be located just below Father Crowley Point in Rainbow Canyon, more recently better known as Star Wars Canyon, a popular low-level training route. I know the area well. I'll show you the local terrain. It's been a training area there in Death Valley since World War II. It's all part of the R-2508 restricted area airspace operated by Edwards Air Force Base. Lieutenant Walker was a member of the VFA 151 Vigilante Squadron, Strike Fighter Squadron out of Lemoore, California. He'd been with the squadron most recently since February of 2018. Before that, he was deployed on the USS John C. Stennis CVN-74 aircraft carrier. Before that, he was flying with the Dam Buster Strike Fighter Squadron 195 out of Iwakuni, Japan. Previous to that, he'd attended Strike Fighter Weapons School there at Lemoore, and he was commissioned back in 2008 as a graduate from the Embry-Riddle Aviation School, a very experienced Navy fighter pilot. My name's Juan Brown. I've been flying over 40 years, civilian, military, and airlines. I'm fairly familiar with the area where this accident occurred. I'll show you the lay of the land. We'll also go over some of the issues that investigators will be looking at concerning this accident. The Death Valley area and Restricted Area 2508 offers some of the best and biggest airspace for tactical fighter training and low-level training in the United States. From left to right, you have the Sierra Nevada Mountains, the Owens Valley, then Saline Valley, then Death Valley, and finally Pahrump Valley. These jet fighter aircraft typically come ripping down Saline Valley, and if you're out there on a dirt bike, I've been jumped many times, especially at the South Pass point, before entering the Father Crowley or Jedi Transition Star Wars Canyon. This canyon is located right along Highway 190, the main entrance into Death Valley from the west, Lone Pine. The entry into this canyon starts with a hard left-hand entry, followed by a jink to the right, and a descent from nearly 5,000 feet down to about a little over 2,000 feet. Father Crowley Point offers a dramatic view of this canyon and the larger Panamint Valley off to the right. It features a parking lot right next to the highway and a long walking path right along the edge of the canyon where aviation photographers gather frequently to witness these military low-level flybys. Here's what this action typically looks like, courtesy of UK Aviation Movies.
X-1, CLS-18, exiting 500 Point Juliet. Kilo 112 F-18 exiting the route at Point Juliet. Aircraft be advised, X-1 31 single F-18, ready the Jedi transition, departing transit sound.
The accident occurred about 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning. Lieutenant Walker was in the lead aircraft of a two-ship formation of F-18s in trail formation. Once the accident occurred, the second aircraft in the formation pulled up and circled and began search and air rescue operations. So some of the things investigators are going to be looking at, did Lieutenant Walker simply overcook the turn and hit the terrain? Was the sun a factor that early in the morning? Was he temporarily blinded by the sun, or was some of the close terrain shadowed by the low sun angles? Was there a mechanical issue with the airplane? Was there a possible bird strike that could have taken him down? Was this a physiological incident? Was it a possible G-lock or G-induced loss of consciousness? This is extremely physically demanding flying and mentally task-saturating flying. It's a young man's sport. At age 33, Lieutenant Walker was at the top of his game. You do not see retired old airline pilots out there attempting this sort of aviation. Let me talk a little bit about G-induced loss of consciousness and why investigators need to consider that. The entry into Star Wars Canyon involves a hard left turn heading from basically a southerly heading to a easterly heading. It's a descending turn too, but it's a fairly quick turn, so that would give you not a long sustained amount of G force on the human body, but a rather quick or high onset G rate, a quick bat type turn to get into the canyon. G-induced loss of consciousness is caused by blood simply leaving the brain and pooling up in the lower extremities of the body, and is a very common problem with high-speed, high-performance jet fighter type flight. These fighter pilots are typically wearing G-suits amongst their lower extremities to help pump that blood back up into the upper part of your body, and most importantly, your brain.
The G-suit is the chaps looking affair I'm wearing over my legs and is typically inflated by bleed air from the jet via a hose that's plugged into the bleed air system. Pilots also learn breathing techniques to counteract the effects of high G flight.
The symptoms of G-lock are pretty common. Your vision begins graying out on the periphery, and then it comes down to just a very narrow tunnel, and if you completely G-lock out or lose consciousness, that tunnel disappears. It goes black. You lose control of all your motor skills at that point. In the event of a low-level situation, it's just nearly always fatal. When you recover from the G-induced loss of consciousness, you unload the G loading on your body. You go through several seconds of funky chicken sort of action where your body doesn't know quite how to react, and then it still takes several more seconds for your body and your brain to get back working again, fully functioning, realizing where you are, what you're doing, and regaining control of the aircraft. Again, a very fatal situation in low-level flight. We have no idea if this was a factor or not in this accident. Was this Lieutenant Walker's first flight back into the low-level mountainous flight regime after his deployment on the aircraft carrier? Some of the other, they'll be looking at his 48-hour history prior to this accident as well.
Here's some classic F-18 cockpit low-level footage coming up, I believe the Klamath or Eel River here in Northern California, showing again just how stressful this kind of flying is. Of course, this low-level route has already been worked out for obstacles and wires. The whole idea of remaining low level is to avoid detection from enemy fire. Of course, flying up a line of communication like a river may very well alert folks to your pending arrival. Another common tactic when approaching high ridge lines low level is to roll the aircraft inverted to avoid a negative G bunting over the top of the ridge and keep the nose down and remain low level. Extremely physically demanding work, all the while maintaining situational awareness of the battlefield, where the good guys are, where the bad guys are, where the threats are, and executing the mission. This is why training is so important to remain proficient at this level of qualification.
So I hope this gives you a little better understanding of the recent FA-18 crash in Death Valley. See you here.